Herschel Walker's defeat in Georgia is the last blow of a disappointing midterm election year for Republicans, and the finger pointing is fierce.
In an election year when it should have been a referendum on the current administration and their policies, the Democrats in many cases were able to kind of turn it into a choice election because of Trump's presence.
And we have no blueprint for what we're for. We're going to have to talk about what worked, not what you're mad about.
We're very disappointed. We didn't get our vote out for sure.
Our great reporters back around the table with us. That was sort of the mild version because they're senators there. They tend to speak more diplomatically or more calmly. There is some pretty fierce. One of the things that you hear more and more and more, it's not universal, nowhere close, more and more is it's Donald Trump, that our problem was Trump and we need to push him to the side. Will that last this time? Not the first time we've heard it. Will it last?
I mean, it's hard to say that it'll last simply because, you know, what the past has shown us is that every time you think that there will be a complete break from the former president, there isn't. If there would have been one, I would have thought it would have been after the January 6th insurrection, and it still didn't come then. So also, those comments from the Republican senators seems to ignore what we were just talking about about abortion access, and ignores the Dobbs decision, which is that played a huge role in Democrats being able to essentially battle Republicans to an even on the economy. If you look at even CNN's exit polling out of the general election, it showed that Republicans voted based on the economy and inflation, and Democrats were boosted extensively by the Dobbs decision.
Right, so you just had a fact-based, logic-based, data-based explanation, right? You can back all of that up with facts. You can look at data and back all that up. The problem for Republicans is as they sort this out, a lot of the debate is going to happen in their own media silo, where you have people saying Donald Trump endorsed Herschel Walker. Herschel Walker could not get votes from the same voters who voted for Brian Kemp, the Republican governor. That tells you we have a problem, right? Voters who are available to Brian Kemp, even in the Democratic suburbs. He didn't win, but he did much better than Herschel Walker. Why aren't they voting? Marjorie Taylor Greene says it's not Trump, it's because they wouldn't let people like me help Herschel Walker.
The audacity and really the frank rudeness of the campaign consultants and Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham, where they thought, you know, we're going to keep Marjorie Taylor Greene away from Herschel Walker, and we don't need her voice at his campaign rallies and events where we're campaigning all over the state, I think is a really major mistake and an insult to me.
Can you have a fact-based, fair, sometimes tough conversation about what went wrong and how do we make it right when you have when that is her view? She believes it.
I mean, two things. I don't want to draw too broad a stroke with Georgia because the Georgia suburbs are more diverse than they used to be, and yet it's the same state that could send Marjorie Taylor Greene right to Congress. I think you want to follow the money, though. If you're Peter Thiel, you just lost a bunch of cash into races where you were not successful. Mehmet Oz just saw what happened when he poured all his money into his race. Democrats were able to put their money to work in smarter ways around more consistent messaging, and they put way more ads on air, and they use them to define these candidates, not just in relation to Trump, but in relation to the actual platform of the party in so many ways, about Dobbs, abortion, and other things. Mm-hmm. So I think these senators feel bold now because they've had a couple voters come out and they feel like, oh, God, okay, I don't have to be scared of Trump. But the truth is, if you don't have a Trump, what is your alternative vision for the ideal Republican candidate?
It's an interesting point because Mike Braun was one of those senators. He's leaving the Senate to go run for Indiana governor, and his point was we need to also explain what we're for. And I think that's your point. Make a policy argument because the Democrats were making policy arguments. But you're trying to make that argument where your only declared candidate for president right now, if you're a Republican thinking about 2024, is Donald J. Trump. And Karl Rove, who helped George W. Bush win the White House, says we ought to realize the Trump endorsement is not an inducement to support that candidate, but a warning to beware. I think you could edit that a bit to say it may well help in the primary to support a candidate, but in the general election, that's the beware.
And I think, the lesson is crystal clear from this midterm, and Karl Rove hit it on the head. But what it doesn't really tell us is what this means for Donald Trump in a presidential primary of his own. If he looks weaker now, oh, wow, maybe 12 or 15 other Republicans will say, I can beat him. Well, that's how he succeeded the first time in 2015 and 2016. So in many respects in Florida, they're saying, bring it on. He wants a big field. But I think the reality here is I was in Georgia, and one thing that Herschel Walker didn't do, he didn't change his message at all or appeal to those voters. He wanted Marjorie Taylor Greene's district. That was not his problem. His problem was, as Audie said, of course, it's a very diverse and different state, but his problem was not in her district.
All right. Brian Kemp won by nearly 300,000 votes. There were plenty of voters available for Republican candidates that did not vote for Herschel Walker.